morning, everybody. Good afternoon, it is. Hello, and welcome to this, the next Landcare Conference webinar, another webinar in the series of fantastic snapshots into some of the Landcare content and introductions to some of the great Landcarers we have right across Australia. My name's Chris McCulloch. I'm with Local Land Services in New South Wales, and very lucky and very privileged to be your facilitator for today. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the First Nations peoples of all the lands that we meet on today. I'm here in Bathurst, which is in the middle of Wiradjuri country in New South Wales. And I pay my respects on behalf of us all to the elders, past, present, emerging, of the nations in which we all find ourselves today. Look, as we couldn't come together this year for the National Landcare Conference, we're bringing you a series of webinars. Hopefully you've been able to join us for some of our previous webinars, and hopefully you'll join us for some future webinars as well. Today, we're looking at a really exciting topic, which will be around Landcare business. And we've got with us some fantastic presenters today. Kylie Durant from Holbrook Landcare, which is not too far from my neck of the woods down the road in New South Wales, and Philip Morman from Nursery District Landcare Association, not too far from the beach that I like to go to when I'm on holidays, joining us today. And look, it's fantastic and my pleasure to introduce you to, and fantastic that you could both be with us today. Today we'll be looking at presentations that come from our Landcare Impact stream from the conference. And we're going to be hearing from Kylie and Phil about how they operate, how they've achieved results, and how they've invested in their people with a strategic focus on their Landcare businesses, those being Holbrook and Noosa District Landcare. Some of the housekeeping. Today, we'd really love to hear from you. Today's about passing on knowledge, so we really want to get your questions. If you've got questions, jump into the chat function and the comment function and put the questions through. We're going to hear from both Kylie and Phil this morning, or this afternoon again, straight off the bat, and then we'll have a session of questions at the end. So make sure you get those questions in there. To do that, you've got to be signed into Landcarer, which hopefully you are if you're watching this today. If you've got any technical issues and you're signed into Landcare, there should be a green help button. I think you can get onto, or you can email for support, a link that's on your screen there now at hithere@landcarer.com.au. Anything left to say before we introduce Kylie as our first speaker is to thank all of you for being here again. Thank Landcare Australia, and of course, the Australian government's National Landcare program, whose support has made this all possible. Kylie, I'm going to throw over to you. Another quick last minute reminder, if you've got any questions, please do get them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And Kylie, if you're ready, it's over to you, mate.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chris. And yes, it's afternoon.
It is. Sorry about that.
Get out in the sun more. So thank you very much, everybody, for the opportunity today. I have worked here at Holbrook Landcare for about 7 years, but I am a long-time resident of this area. So I've been involved with Landcare both as a member and, as is my privilege now, as a staff member here, doing project management and executive officer role. So that's me, but who is Holbrook Landcare for all the people who potentially don't know who we are? Sorry, I'll just get my screen going. So we are a Landcare and producer network down in the south of New South Wales. So down here, this sort of green blob represents our sort of core Landcare area. Holbrook is on the Hume Highway between Sydney and Melbourne, and we are actually halfway. So you may have been to Holbrook before. If you've been to the town with the big submarine, that is us. And it is one thing that we are famous for. Hopefully one day we'll be famous for our Landcare as well. In terms of the towns, we're between Albury and Wagga, and that green blob represents sort of our traditional Landcare area. So way back when, Holbrook has a really long history of Landcare for 30 years, but before Landcare, there were a Trees on Farms group. And before that, there were various sort of agricultural advisory groups and bureaus and things as well. So there's a long history of producers coming together in this catchment to share their ideas and share their learnings. I think that has a lot to do with the success of Holbrook Landcare nowadays. So originally it was a Landcare group. You know, there were sub-catchments. There were leaders from those sub-catchments that came together to form a bit of a board and a committee. And like many probably Landcare groups out there listening today, that's generally how we all started. I guess our journey has been about reinventing ourselves a little bit to try and take advantage of or adapt, I suppose, to the funding situations. And these days, just to flash up what our sort of membership looks like, it's much broader than just that little Landcare area. It's more about communities' practice around, you know, pasture management, soil management, and some of our natural resource issues. So it's not just based around Holbrook anymore, but certainly through shared practice and shared agricultural background, I suppose. What does our land look like? So we're typical of the southwest slopes. We're in a 700 to 800 mil rainfall, which, thanks Phil, is a 28-inch rainfall. So we're considered high rainfall for here, and we're very much a mixed farming area. So east of the highway, it's mostly a grazing landscape, a mixture of cattle and sheep. And to the west of the highway is definitely more of a mixed farming, a lot of opportunistic cropping, and certainly the dual purpose crops form a big part of business around here. So that's sort of a snapshot of the land. I'm going to try and play this little video. As you can see, you know, rolling hills of beautiful green. But, you know, the thing that got Landcare together was really about the trees in this landscape. So you can see some of the creek lines still have good tree cover, you know, some of our big hills and of course our national parks and things do. But the farming landscape, you know, there was a real loss of vegetation. And a lot of the NRM issues that come along with that, like salinity, and that was really what got the group together in the first place. So a lot of the work has been about trying to get those trees back in that landscape. Landcare is about our members. So this is our 30-year dinner. We do like to party down here at Holbrook Landcare. There's lots of these photos. But, you know, what our business is about our members. And people often ask me, oh, you know, what's the Landcare structure, that sort of thing. You know, really what we are about foremost is servicing our members. What we've had to do in terms of structuring our business is it all goes back to trying to provide the resources, the education, the extension, and the things that our members want, which are our farmers in this district. We provide the forums where people come together over new knowledge. We do the field days out, you know, in the paddock. We do the soil pits. We have various programs, you know, big training program. This is ProGraze course where we have a lot of our farmers have workers that we are able to help put through training programs. You know, introducing farmers to new systems and new ideas. Really, that's what we're about. We do lots of trials. So we have technical staff as well, and trials around this is an acid soil trial on canola and the cropping landscape. And really what we're about is telling our landholder stories. So we've, you know, really got some high achievers in our catchment, and what we want to do is celebrate that and tell their stories well. This is what a board meeting looked like in 2002. So as I've mentioned before, we had a series of, you know, sub-catchment groups across that traditional Landcare area, and the leaders of those sub-catchment groups came together to form a committee, and, you know, that was Landcare. And really that was a model that worked really well up until there was a bit of a pinch point in the early 2000s. To do with the way that funding was delivered. So the NHT had finished, all that sort of thing. I think all the groups are pretty familiar with that. And, you know, this model of, you know, local issues, bringing people together and feeding up had changed a lot. And so here in the community, there was a point at which they thought Landcare would fold in Holbrook. There was a big public meeting to say, well, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to, do we want it to continue? And if so, how are we going to achieve that? And there was an overwhelming desire to keep that group rolling. But it required a bit of a change and in the way that we did business. So this is our board now. Well, some members have actually changed since this, and we do have a couple of other women who weren't here. So there is a fair bit of balance. But you can, even just those two pictures, it's very different. So our model now, it was decided that we needed to scale up in order to, attract enough funds to keep going. What we needed to do is look beyond our area and look at the issues. So take away the boundaries and just work on issues with other producers outside of the area, other farming systems groups, other researchers. And in order to do that, we created a different sort of board. So rather than representative, it was a skills-based board. Still very important that landholders form most of our board, but a lot of them bring other skills to the table. So in this picture, so Sandy, he's a landholder, but he's also an agronomist, and we've got Sarah, who's got marketing experience, Tony, that's got graphic design experience, and Dougal, who is a great bird man, but also a great accountant. So look, getting a really tight group of people and based on their skills rather than representing particular areas was really important. We became, instead of just an incorporated group, we became a company, limited by guarantee. So a not-for-profit company that just gave the directors that bit of protection. So, and that's important when you're trying to attract skilled people in the business world. So it was a very, very different model, and the board became very strategic. So the operational side of the business is managed now by an executive officer or an executive team, rather than the board having to deal with that sort of everyday stuff. Worked very hard on the governance structures to make all of that work. You've got to have a lot of processes and a lot of, I guess, trust in your executive officer. Luckily, Landcare attracts great people who are true believers in the cause, and that's been the case for Holbrook all the way through. Our board are really busy, so we want to attract, business-minded, innovative people. This is our chair, Colin Geddes, who's actually a third-generation Landcare chair. So his grandfather was involved back in the 60s with the Trees on Farms, 60s, 70s, Trees on Farms, and his father has been a Landcare committee member for a long time, and now Colin's come on board. But what we have to do is be really flexible. These guys are really running big businesses. They're really busy. So this is how we sign audits these days. Often we're going to them and just trying to be a little bit flexible with how we do things. Another important part of us is our home. What's our base? So this building in Holbrook is right next to the Holbrook Bakery, which is the second most important place in Holbrook after the submarine. And a few years ago, we had the chance to buy this building. So we were originally in it. We had to rent, around for a little while, but we had the opportunity to buy it, and it's now ours, and that really gives us a stable base from which to do all of our work. And you can see it's in the main street, so it's highly accessible for all our members and highly accessible for the general public. So being between Melbourne and Sydney, that bakery is one of the most busiest places in the world at Christmas and Easter, and so we have a chance also to showcase, sustainable agriculture and NRM to a broader audience, which is great. It's also great in the community. So this was when we were in the building the first time in 2003, when the Brookers won the grand final, and one of our staff members then was on the local footy team. So come on, Cozzy, do it for the birds. The other part is staff. So to support that strategic board, you need a great operational system. So you need a great leader in an executive officer or a management team, and you need great staff. And we've had some fabulous staff over the years. I had a photo full of all the faces, but that probably doesn't mean much to most people. But it means a lot to Holbrook Landcare, that legacy of, staff who have come and been prepared to work with a whole lot of really innovative people and have bright ideas, and that's really paid off for us over the years. So one of our huge priorities is to try and make sure that we can continue in our business. And as I mentioned before, we are not for profit. What we need to do is change our thinking around to being profit for purpose. It's an increasingly corporate world where we're competing or, against consultancies and things for some of our business. And, we have to think like them too. It's not it's not the grassroots of Landcare that I know, but it's the reality these days. And so in terms of staff, we need to support, we need to get money to support those good staff and keep them on. And that's a big part of our strategy and a big part of our executive officer's role. So what does that mean, though, in terms of our, the impact? By having that bigger strategic view, processes in place, it really does get you out of your little sub-catchment and look at, what we've done across the catchment. And somebody back in about 2005 had the foresight to say, why don't we map, where all the investment's gone in terms of projects and things in the catchment and what landholders have done themselves. And so when you start to put that on a map, you start to see, the impact on the ground of what Landcare can do. And we have a story like this for soils also, which we're just putting together now. But look, the vegetation story has really come together in the last few years for us. So, in terms of investment, that's looking after remnant vegetation and new vegetation in the catchment up until about 2007. And if you add to that the works that's gone on with the regional NRM bodies, that some of which is in partnership with Holbrook Landcare, we've had a significant impact on the vegetation resources in this catchment. And we hear a lot, especially with the Natural Heritage Trust, it was all a waste of money. Where did it go? There's no accountability. That is rubbish. And I think that Landcare really needs to stick up for itself and say, actually, no, we are a really sophisticated organisation at the network level, and that we can pull some of this information out. In fact, we reported all this back to you, so how come you can't tell this story? Anyway, so in terms of the on-ground impact has been huge. And so that's investment. So we know where the fences went and where the revegetation, was supposed to go. So did it? Can we tell? And luckily, through our partnership with Murray Local Land Services last year, I've got some nice pretty pictures in there as well. That's the change. It's vegetation resources back in the catchment. So with that evaluation project, we were able to look at the landscape from space. So those Landsat satellite pictures, which are taken all the time, we were able to get a consultant to have a look and say, well, can we see the change from space? Is it real? All those investment sites, have they worked? And by looking at it, all these different little sub-catchments on this map, you can see, so Holbrook, that Holbrook area is in here. But there's also other groups like West Hume Landcare, Bungawana Splitters, which did a lot of work back in the 90s and early 2000s, similar to Holbrook. And you can see at the sub-catchment level, we've got a positive change in woody cover at those sites, investment sites in there. So, the answer to the question, did it work and have we made a difference is yes. And we can see it from space now. Overall, woody catchment cover has also increased. So, and a lot of that is attributable back to those investment sites. Around in Holbrook, so these catchments here, which are showing the greatest change of veg cover overall, they were the catchments that were the Thugger Lane area, which some of you might have even visited over the years. They were the first, salinity veg management sites really in New South Wales. And, what we're seeing today is the impact of that investment. So it's in veg cover, but did we save the birds or whatever it is we were trying to do. And luckily in the Southwest Slopes, we've got the Australian National University of the Southwest Slopes project, which is looking at that very thing. So it has farms in this landscape that have been followed for nearly 15 years now to look at, if you put re-veg on farms, do you get more birds? And those might be familiar with the literature that's come out of the Lindenmayer group that says, yes, you can make a difference in this landscape for birds. And there's lots of data being collected on small reptiles and mammals as well. So, we've got our fabulous story. And I guess, I think this is the last slide, but what that means, that strategic overview and treating, just being able to get out of your own little backyard has allowed Holbrook to have this vision and put these stories together. And I think it's something that is quite underdone, in Landcare. And I think we're having a really good go at it, and we feel like we're very successful. It's not, the grassroots in Landcare. I'm a true believer. Taking that business approach sometimes feels wrong, but look, this is the world we live in now, and I think we need to embrace it.
Excellent. Thanks, Kylie. I think Holbrook's done a fantastic job down there in what it has set up as a business, and I really encourage everybody online today to ask more questions of Kylie. Get them in the chat. We're going to come back and check in with Kylie after we hear from Phil. But look, great presentation, Kylie, and really great to hear some of the work you're doing in that neck of the woods. We're going to move up north now and hand the ball over to Phil, who's going to give us a rundown on what's happening in the Noosa and District Landcare Group. I think Phil's presentation's called something along the lines of, "We don't just plant trees, we grow people." And I was lucky enough to go and visit the Noosa Landcare Group as part of one of the field trips for the last National Landcare Conference when I was based in Brisbane, and saw firsthand some of the fantastic work they're getting done on the ground. And Phil, if you're ready to go, mate, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And Kylie, terrific presentation. I don't suppose you'd like to move north and come and work for us? Okay. So the thing that struck me about Kylie's presentation was the similarities in the journey that we've both gone through. Now, the slide in front of you tells you a little bit about the group as it is today. We currently actually have 56 staff. We're the second biggest employer in Pomona. We still have our volunteers. Membership base isn't huge, it's around about 400 people. But we engage with lots of different partners and organisations. It's our AGM tomorrow, so we're all getting ready for that. But in the last financial year, we turned over $2.6 million. So coming with that requires quite a lot of administration and good management skills. So if we jump to the next slide, if you don't mind, Ryan. So the reason for this one is to tell you that it wasn't always so. As you can see, that's an outside dunny. This was our first nursery. So Kylie was with her group for 7 years. I joined Noosa Landcare in 1990, started volunteering in 1991. I became full-time in 1997, and they haven't been able to get rid of me for 23 years. Back in the old days, we did NHT1 projects, and some of them were very good. We got some really good outcomes. But the problem was that it became like a little bird wanting a grub from a handout, a funding grant. And these were terrific. They were finite. So you employ a project officer, they start to get a rapport with landowners, the farmers start to develop a relationship with them, and the project stops. That person who's trained up and got skills and knowledge of our area moves on. So what we decided is that we talk a lot as Landcare about a sustainable environment. Why don't we look at a sustainable business model? that led us into going down the fee-for-service journey, which is not always easy, but it's proved to give us a lot more resilience. As I said, staff would have to leave at the end of their projects. As we stand today, we have 7 staff that are due for long service leave. For a Landcare group, that's quite surprising. When I first started here, our first company car was my car, our first chainsaw was my chainsaw, the secateurs were mine, the Wellington boots were mine. That's what we did. Now we have 2 Land Cruisers and quick spray units, 10 4-wheel drive vehicles, 3 nurseries, and just recently, it's not even officially opened, but I'll just show you a picture of our new venture if we can jump to the next slide. So this is what we call the Hinter Hub. At Noosa Landcare, we have a number of business units. So the organisation is divided up into these various business units: on-ground contracting, nursery, retail operations, ecological consultancies, and education and training. And I'll talk a little bit more about the education and training as we get through it. But this one will be open soon. We used the fact that we had to close our small retail outlet during the COVID outbreak to revamp this space, to make it the centre of Pomona, increase the sales to not just plants, but all sorts of environmentally based or sourced artisans, products like garden ornaments and jewellery and wooden toys for kids. During COVID, a lot of people were building stuff and making stuff at home, but they don't have a retail outlet for it. So this is what we provide. And we're very excited about this new venture, and we'll be officially opening it very soon. So if we go into the next one, I'll talk to you a little bit about some of our education and training. I mentioned to Kylie and Chris and Trish before we came on that when I joined, the group had a lot of elderly people that were retired and volunteering, and that's great. But in terms of the health of an organisation, we need to have young people coming through the organisation. People talk about why don't we get young people to volunteer? Because they've got to pay their mortgage. They've got to have a job. They've got to have a life. So I can't expect them to give up their time and come and volunteer. But you can if we pay them. So we have a lot of people that we put through the various state government run employment programs. And the other good thing about that is that we get the opportunity to try before we buy. So we have these young people, some of them show tremendous potential. And then we say, okay, well, you're somebody that might be able to do a first start traineeship with us. How about you stay on for a year? And then we can move them into positions of project officers within the organisation. So it's a very healthy organisation when you've got young people coming together. Just go to the next one, because this is something that I think was very important during COVID. When I did interviews for the last Skilling Queenslanders for Work, 4 of the people mentioned eco-anxiety. So these were young people that were concerned about the future of our environment. They didn't just want to click onto a Facebook link. They wanted to go out and plant trees and do something actively to help. So I think it's about the health of our land and water, the health and future of the Landcare movement, and each individual person's health. And I can tell you, we've saved a number of young people from being in very tough situations by getting them out in the bush, killing some weeds, planting some trees, feeling the sun, learning about the birds and the trees and things like that. Very, very rewarding. So I'll just show you some pickies of some of our little projects. This is one we've done, and it's under the banner of what we call Trees for Tourism. So these are our young kids. That's Noosa and the sand blow you can see in the background at Kalula. Not a bad office really. But this is part of, the next slide is what we call Trees for Tourism. This is an interesting one. Some of you might have heard of Noosa. It's a place where people go for holidays. So some time ago, I got friendly with the general manager of Pepper's, Noosa Resort and Villas, and we were talking, and he said, well, one of the reasons we've got a successful business is because of the quality of the environment here. How about we put $2 aside for every function guest we have, give you the money, you plant trees in the hinterland to offset the damage we're doing by operating our business. Great idea, terrific. Now it's expanded to other organisations within the tourism industry, including the Noosa Triathlon, which is the largest triathlon in the world. So 12,000 people, each one donates just $1. We get $12,000, we plant trees, and we get their staff to come along and plant the trees. One of the other side effects, they used to use 80,000 plastic cups in the triathlon. Last year, they used 80,000 compostable cups. So the spin-offs are really good. If you have a look at the next picky, you can see these are the staff from Ironman doing planting together with our Skilling Queenslanders for Work crew. So they all came out and donated their day's labour to do some planting. What I'm going to do is this is going to become the Noosa Tri Forest. So each year we'll add to it, and each year the participants and staff can come out and say, have a look at what we planted, and it just gets bigger each year. Next picky, this is just a picture of the same site taken from a drone, and I want to do the same each year, and then they can use that on their promotional equipment, promotional stuff, and I'm sure they'll use it well. Okay, one last one on the next one, which is on our First Start trainees. So these are people that have gone through the Skilling Queenslanders for Work, and then they do a year-long traineeship where they get a Certificate 3 in Conservation and Land Management. It also gives us the opportunity to be able to pick some of these people and employ them. Of the people you can see here, 8 out of the 10 are working for us, and 2 more have jobs within the industry with council. So I'm pretty pleased about that from a success, and that program has proved its worth. That girl in the top right hand side of your picture is going to be Prime Minister. She came here with an honours degree in environmental science, but recognised she couldn't identify plants. She did a Skilling Queenslanders for Work for about $15 an hour, started to learn some things, then a First Start traineeship. Now she manages a big project for SEQ Water and also for BMRG up at Susan River. These are the examples of people that we're growing from within the organisation. Next slide is one I'm particularly happy about, is we managed to cook up a deal through Transport and Main Roads, and this is the good work of our Business Development Manager, Rachel Lyons. This is a Kabi capacity building program whereby we employ Indigenous trainees, and we've got a 5-year deal whereby we employ 2 young people per year, train them up and give them hopefully full-time employment. Next slide shows you Laurie. On the left, Laurie's just finished his 1 year, and already he's been picked up by Queensland Parks and Wildlife, and he's doing a trial with them, and I'm pretty sure he'll get a full-time job. The other guy's Josh, terrific guy. He's just about to finish his traineeship, and my insiders tell me council is looking at employing him. Only got a couple more pickies. One, I just had to show you the scale of some of the work we do. A couple of years ago, working under the federal government's Million Tree program, we planted 340,000 trees at a Lander Point, which we grew and planted ourselves. It was hard work, but it's done. It's a forest. Second last one. This one here was another interesting partnership, again through our Business Development Manager. So that's Rachel with the on the right of your screen. She contacted the World Biobridges and managed to get £70,000 to support koalas in Australia. The first time that organisation has spent money in Australia. Then the Body Shop in Australia said, we're not going to miss out. We'll sell these head garments, and they raised $70,000. So we've added that and planted a whole lot of land for koala trees in the Noosa hinterland. A really great outcome. When I talk to our local councillors, I let them know that not 1 cent of ratepayers' money went into this. We pulled that money into it. Okay, I think we've got one more picky. So that's the current mob. Kylie said she didn't want to show you all the pictures of her mob because they didn't mean anything, but mine was such a good looking mob. How could you not put them there? On this day, there was actually 7 people that couldn't make it in that day. Every single one of those people get a paycheck. They don't get a very big paycheck, but they do, and they spend money within our little town. So not only do we help the environment, we're helping the economy, and we're also helping their individual health. So from my point of view, it's been a real pleasure to work here and to see the group grow to the extent that it has, and to learn from all these young people that are coming through. Anyway, thank you all very much for listening today.
Good on you, Phil. What a great presentation. What a great couple of stories from some fantastic land care organisations. It's really interesting to see the common threads that you have in different business models, different landscapes, different population densities, different local government, state government environments, but still some of those foundation principles applying is really great to see. But we're going to throw over to some questions in a minute. But look, first of all, one of the privileges of being the facilitator is I get to ask my questions first. Kylie, I'm going to throw to you, if you don't mind. You talked a little bit about a skills-based board in your area. I know a lot of land care organisations and land care groups really sometimes struggle to get board members or committee members. Have you got any tips on how to try and attract those really skilled and valuable people, and how to keep them?
So splitting the strategic from the operational is really important for us. So having the board talking about the higher level stuff and not getting involved in the nitty gritty of the gutters falling off, is someone going to fix it, staffing issues, all those sort of things. So having that separation is really important, I think. As I said, our board is our only volunteers, really. We live in a town of 2,000 people. And if you're a volunteer in Holbrook, you're a volunteer on 5 things already. So, there's a lot of competition for people's time. And I think, that's the key thing is don't bog it down in detail. What you really want to keep the board at that strategic level.
Yeah, look, I think that's great advice. Phil, you're nodding your head. Have you got any thoughts on that one too?
Yeah, sure. I understand where you're coming from, Kylie. We're a little bit different, as Chris mentioned, a different demographic. We have a sort of a skills-based board as well. We do have volunteers. We have about 40 volunteers. But in terms of our board, our treasurer and treasurers are really important. $2.6 million, it's not a lot for big companies, but it's a lot for us. So our treasurer was the chief financial officer for the Mars Corporation, which also encompasses PAL and Whiskers Pet Food. So he'd spent 6 months in Washington, 6 months in London. I think he's got the ability to count our beans at being at that level. Our chair is Dr. Kim Barnes, who's a professor at the University of the Sunshine Coast doing environmental stuff, and I'm very pleased that we've got a lady chair. Our previous chair was an Indigenous fellow for 3 years, so that added a lot of advice and knowledge too. We've got an old fellow. When I say an old fellow, he was part of the original Landcare setup, got a degree in environmental science, but he's our conscience. He was here right at the beginning, so he's makes sure that we still stay true to our beliefs, and that's great. We've got another guy from ex-DPI, Department of Primary Industries, another bloke who's a soil scientist, and the shallow end of the gene pool is me. I'm actually on the board, but I'm there as a conduit between the staff and the executive. So I'm elected, hopefully tomorrow, and then it means our board doesn't micromanage. I've been involved in many groups where they look over your shoulder and look at the type of paperclip you use. We don't have that. Our board looks at strategic issues, and if I've got some problems, I bring it to them and they help us solve them. But yes, I was very interested to hear your comments, because we do need to have a board that reflects that knowledge that we're required in this day and age.
Yeah, look, I think that's pretty sound advice, and very, very interesting comments. Something that I know a lot of groups struggle with. Look, bad news, Kylie, your application to move to Noosa has been denied by Paula. I just need to let you know that you'll be sticking around. She's not ready to let you go yet. I'm going to throw over to Brian. He's posed a question, and I'll post it to both of you. How closely do you tie in the Landcare hands to your brand and your business? Carrying a bit of weight? Kylie, go for it.
Oh, okay.
You unmuted first, so you get first.
I was unmuted first. The hands are the most recognised brand in Australia, I think. But we have our own brand as well, and I think that's important. So one of the things about Landcare is that not all the groups are the same, and it's not a hierarchical structure. And I know people get frustrated about that because it's quite hard to manage, but it's the strength of Landcare. So we've got a window. We'll sell you some space if you like.
We'll see. Phil, how do you guys find that connection? You obviously got it on your chest there. It still carries a lot of weight in your neck of the woods. Other side, mate.
Yeah, got it. Yes, it does. And I agree with Kylie's comment. It's an extremely recognised brand. I've been fortunate enough to do a bit of stuff through the National Landcare Network, Australia-wide, and it's enormously well recognised, not just here, but overseas. We have our own because we're nursery and district Landcare. So we're very different to Kylie's mob and different to Landcare groups that may have a couple of people doing weeding once a month. And that's great. Good on them. More power to them. What it means is that we have to carve our own niche out and have to stand on our own two legs. It has pluses and minuses. We have to prove that we're professional and we can deliver at that level. And I'm sure you guys are aware it's pretty tough out there. A lot of contractors that we compete against don't supply the things we do as a community group. They don't supply the training to young people. They don't supply the stuff to schools. They don't identify plants for people that walk in off the street. We do all that. So I have to make sure so that we keep the people that we put in our applications to that are aware of that. But the truth is we apply for tenders and we have to compete on a commercial basis. But I still believe that the Landcare brand, no, there it is. Yep. I got the right side, mate. I think it's a valuable asset.
Yeah. No, I think I would completely agree with you there. And look, you've probably touched on a little bit, Phil, our next question from Alicia, who was asking about the sort of services you provide to make an income. You mentioned some really diverse sources of income in your neck of the woods, Philip. Is that your core focus on how you make an income? And how do you, I'm going to add a little bit extra on here. How do you decide the avenues you want to take to try and make that income?
Beautiful questions.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
It's
Thanks, Alicia.
Almost a Dorothy Dixer. If I go to the first one, which you said, how do you decide? When we had our Indigenous chairman, he was a bachelor man, and one of their laws was what's good for the land comes first. So every project we apply to do goes through the filter of, is it good for the land? And we've had opportunities to do work for transport and main roads in one particular case, but it didn't suit that filter. So we decided we weren't going to do it. So every job we do has to have a general net benefit to the environment. That's the answer to that one. In terms of the projects we do, as I mentioned, we have business units. We are a non-for-profit community group. My job is to make us a non-for-loss community group. So we make a surplus, hopefully, that I reinvest into chainsaws, vehicles, education, upgrading the IT so I can get an extra screen one day to come close to you, Chris. In terms of our units, we've got obviously plant sales. We do a lot of consultancies. So we do consultancies for councils. We do a lot of project coordination, contract services. We've got 20 staff that go out, kill weeds, plant trees, do on-ground work, and a lot of education and training. So we have a number of different things. In terms of clients, we work for Veolia. You might have heard of them. It's one of the largest organisations in the world. We work from Ipswich to Miriamvale. We work for SEQ Water, Transport and Main Roads, Tourism, NUSA, regional bodies, councillors, and a lot of private individuals that are our members that want work done on their property. We will do that, and our members get discounts, so we encourage them. During COVID, that's gone through the roof because people want to do more work on their own properties. So yeah, it's varied, but that also gives you health. You need to broaden your revenue base. So we're not relying on money from one council, because if they get a new mayor and she doesn't like us, it's all over. Thanks. Good question.
Yeah. No, good. Yeah, good question. Good points. Kylie, anything you want to add before we jump to our last question?
I guess so. Holbrook Landcare, our traditional business is about grants and contracts with the likes of some of the RDCs and things like that. So we have dipped our toe recently into service provision, and yeah, we're looking at that as an option. But there is a sweet spot there for us anyway between what we are about, which is our farming members and providing them with the services and extension that they want, and doing things that are too big. And we have gone down that path. Like when we first turned to that sort of different model, we probably swung the pendulum too far to doing things that actually didn't have anything to do with Holbrook and that the basic sort of member requirements. So yeah, there's a sweet spot there, I think, but we're definitely looking far and wide for different funding models, because it's a changing world, and then government investments is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, look, you're right, Kylie. I think that a challenge for all Landcare is about maintaining your economic vitality, but staying true to your values, Phil, which you touched on a little bit as well. A quick one in here from Brian for you, Kylie. What was Holbrook's legal entity before you decided to become a company?
So we were just an incorporated group before that.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. Look, I'm going to wrap it there. We've reached the end of our time and end of our questions. Thank you, everybody, for the questions you've submitted, and thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Kylie and Philip for joining us today and passing on really valuable, really great information. I'm sure both of you are welcome. Anybody who's with us today, if they decided to pop in for a visit, check out the bakery, or pop in, and hopefully you've got a new dunny, Phil. We never got to that, whether you're still using the outside one or not, but you're not?
No,
Okay.
I'm not going to. Look, thank you all very much. I appreciate it a lot, and it's great to be involved.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you. We've still got an outside dunny if you ever feel the need. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and yeah, it's great to meet you too, Phil. I'll think about that offer.
Think about the offer. Well, look, thank you guys. Thank you, everyone. Again, look, a quick thank you to Landcare Australia for making sure we haven't missed too much in this COVID world. And another last thank you to the Australian Government's National Landcare Program for their support for this initiative. Today's video and session has been recorded, and you will receive access to it via email, because the way you've registered, it will be on Landcare into the future. Check out Landcare, check out the Landcare Australia website for further webinars coming up. Make sure you're thinking about the actual conference and getting in your diary for later in the year into next year. And look after yourselves and everyone around you out there, guys, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.